St.Ation series on interviewing sabbatical candidates. Today we are interviewing with the candidates for Director of Events and Services, and here we have the lovely Snook, who is one of the candidates. Hello, Caitlin.
Hi, how are you?
I am good, thank you. I'm glad we finally get to meet. I'm very excited to talk to you a little bit more about your manifesto.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
we're just going to start off with some nice and informal, serious questions about your manifesto, etc., and then we'll go into a slightly more light-hearted round, quick fire questions. So,
Okay.
to begin, can you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit more and tell me why you want to apply for this role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a fourth year. I'm a history student, and I'm part of the William and Mary program. So I really felt like I wanted to apply for this role because I felt like I related to what students were going through right now. The pandemic is definitely a unique situation, but so is the program that I'm in. So I kind of can connect and understand the whole separation aspect, feeling like your heart is in a completely different place than where you are right now. It was something that I really identify with. And I think that that's such a rare thing for me to be able to, understand and connect with, that I really felt like I had an insight into what students would want right now. Something very, very particular. I've had time to think about what they want for years. And then at the same time, I really do want to serve the students. I know it sounds cheesy, but I want to provide a good student experience. The program that I'm in has given me more of a student experience than I could have asked for, and than I ever truly expected. And I really feel like right now there's a huge, huge gap that needs to be filled to serve and provide that for other students. And so I really feel like I have the motivation and the genuine interest in making that happen for people. And so that's why I wanted to apply to that role.
Yeah, that's a very good motivation to make a role. You talk a lot about the being a joint program student.
Mhm.
So do you think the fact that you kind of had experience both in William and Mary and St Andrews, do you think that's going to kind of influence your role? Do you think there's some things that William and Mary does better than St Andrews?
I do think there are things that William and Mary does that St. Andrews don't do. Whether that's going to work for St. Andrews or not is to be explored. But I think that that's an exciting part of that, is that I can, troubleshoot those things and see how they work out. One of my manifesto points, actually, the personal wellness series, is something that William and Mary takes very, very seriously. Um, I think that that's something that can always be improved anywhere that we are. But I also think that at St. Andrews right now, maybe that's something that could be served a little bit better. William and Mary is very acutely aware of those things. It's a big part of the culture here. So that's, one example right there of one of my manifesto policies that I feel like has been influenced by being over here. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I would say so. But on the other side of this, do you think potentially not being a student who's been here for all 4 years will maybe disadvantage you in providing a student experience for St Andrews students?
I think the main disadvantage that it would give me would be not having had the ability, or as much of the ability, to get as involved in depth as I would have liked to be before going for this role, if I'm being very, very honest about it. So, when you're flip-flopping back and forth, it's really hard to progress very deeply in certain things. And you're having a fresher's experience wherever you are, and so you want to take that year to have that. Definitely this was my second year when I was over at St. Andrews, but it felt like my first year there. So by second semester, by second year, I wasn't ready to apply for a council position. No matter how much I would have wanted to or would have known that, I didn't know that at the time. And I do regret that. But I think that that detriment can be supported by the reliance on student feedback that I have, and that type of policy that I want to pursue. I think that the main job, and the main, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Purpose of the job is to take in and digest student feedback. So I feel like as long as I'm doing that, I have the ability to kind of take all the knowledge that I need as I'm learning and as I'm, transitioning into the role, and really serve the role well, as long as I'm listening to what the students want. So I have honestly no doubt in my ability to execute the role. it's just a matter of that transition. I need to get started on that as soon as possible.
Yeah, yeah. And I noticed that you do put a lot of emphasis on kind of student events and kind of, yeah, the well-being side of it in your manifesto. What I would say is I don't see a lot in your manifesto about kind of the service side and like kind of the idea of running a union and running the facilities at the university. What would you say? Do you have experience on that? What's your best experience to kind of manage that side of the role? And do you have any plans regarding kind of spaces and management in the union?
Yeah, good question. So, to start with the first part, kind of is your question was about like working with services managing the union, right? What kind of experience do I think I have with that? Okay. So, this might sound like a little bit of a dodgy answer, but because of the position that I have been in, I've been in a position to ask questions a lot. So, I'm not necessarily somebody who's held that, that role or this role or whatever role, but I'm the one that's driving a lot of change. So, for example, I'm actually pushing the joint degree program to release graduation resources for students, to make a big graduation booklet. It's something that we don't have, something that I think would serve us well in the program. And it's something that they are actually starting to work on. So, things like that. Or I've started to talk about, like immigration resources that are available at St. Andrews. I've been in contact with multiple people about those things because I do want to pursue like a master's eventually at some point. And so I feel like my position to ask a million questions has put me in a good position to start or kind of instigate change and provide services. So even though I'm not necessarily like a peer advisor for the program, I'm at the start or, the motivation behind pushing people to make that graduation resource. So I definitely do think I have experience. Can I name it by one certain role? No. But I feel like I'm comfortable with that as long as I can give people concrete examples of how I've done that in the past. And, showing that I have the motivation, even though I'm not in that role, to think about other people as well as myself, but to make change happen as a result. As far as my ideas on policies and management of the union as it opens back up, it's something that we haven't seen a lot in action this past year. So again, I don't have a huge range of knowledge like I could have as far as creativity of what types of events would I like to put on. Those are things that are easier to answer without a previous precedent in front of you. But I do have, ideas about that stuff. I think that there's been a lot of good work done for spaces this year. Anybody who was at the question time last night definitely heard about that a little bit. Trying to help people who were previously homed in the Barren is another thing that I am actually really passionate about personally, especially before I was in this role. As Avery said in his section of the question time, I will also say I personally was not in support of the Barren closing down. I think it was a unique space that students really, really connected with. And I don't think that we have a lot of spaces in our small, tiny little bubble that fit the need as well as that space does. So that's something that it's really on my mind is, not only are other societies out of places and like venues right now, but there are venues that we're starting to run out of. So that's a big part of my manifesto is I word it in university resource exploration and preparation for in-person events. But what I mean by that are those smaller things. So analyzing spaces, looking at capacities, revamping the booking system. Services would be things like providing ENS crew training to societies. That's something that's going to last beyond COVID. That's something that people can take with them beyond this. We can create a society role for that, like a tech officer. And they can come and rent out those things from the union to make it easier on ENS crew so they can work on putting on those big events again once we can have them, because that's going to be on everybody's mind. So I'm definitely thinking about those things, whether they're clearly stated in my manifesto or not. I do have them, on my agenda. But especially I'm looking to get those certain needs filled right now as to what the students feel like should be filled. But my manifesto definitely isn't exhaustive, and I hope people know that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a very nice readable size, so I did enjoy that.
Oh, good.
So yeah, going more into kind of your policies now. So I think one of the things you talked about was having like online videos for freshers to have before they come to kind of like orientate themselves. And I was just wondering, because, there's so much online teaching and learning, and the fact that there's like mandatory online courses that kids have to do before they can matriculate, do you think that people will actually watch these videos, considering, there's just such a lot of online content that they have to consume, that they're probably very screen fatigued?
Right, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I can't answer for them. As far as, putting myself in their shoes, I do think that they'll watch those. I do think that they'll appreciate those resources. Um, this is another thing about the whole William and Mary experience. Not saying that William and Mary does everything right. Definitely, for sure, there's things to be improved. But they do a lot of orientation prep. So orientations in America look very, very different from over in St. Andrews. They're mandatory. You have to go to, screenings on every single student service. And that's not where I want to go with this, because students here are not very pleased with that. It's very hard to feel like you're boxed in and you have to go to this event, that event, everything like that. But at the same time, they do a great job of providing comprehensive resources for students to digest. So whether students use them or not, I hope that it's something that students have an interest in, because that would be my reason for providing it. I do think that even though it is a digital era, it's something that also can last and stick around. Just having a visual introduction to spaces comforts you. If you don't know what the third floor of the Union looks like, it's not that you're going to be terrified of it, but you're probably not going to go up there until you have a need to. Things like that. You don't know what's available to you, and that's a big part of that whole section, is making students aware of what's available to them. They can't go into spaces right now, and if they can't by Freshers Week 2, they need to know what's available to them once they can. So instead of doing this introduction mid-year when we can finally go back into spaces, let's do it now and prepare them so that they feel like they know what their university looks like, or what they can use once things open up.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that the whole kind of what's going to happen next year in terms of what's online, what's not, because as we know, none of us know what's going to happen. But in a scenario where there is a dual kind of teaching format, and potentially a lot of international students like yourself might not even come to St. Andrews, how are you going to design events to be dual delivery?
Yeah, so my in-person opportunities section can be molded to fit that. So my plan, whether it goes one way or the other, is to provide event alternatives. So that's meant primarily as, if it ends up being digital, it ends up being digital. But just in case, we're going to have an idea or a plan or a space set up in mind to where we could carry this out in person. And I think that's going to come in handy, especially when we do a lot of the preparation for next year this summer. So we'll be able to set up those things in advance, and it won't be kind of like an afterthought. I think that that can be applied to this situation. I think that we could provide both of those opportunities. So we could have an in-person version if people did have the capacity to come show up, and we could prepare these digital resources at the same time. So that provision can be adapted to fit kind of whatever scenario we're in at that moment. And that was the intention as well. So I hope that people understand that too, is that it can also be a dual service, but it also is for one or the other, if it ends up being that situation.
Yeah, okay. And I'll give you one last kind of pandemic related question. Um, Academic families have kind of been interrupted by the pandemic. Some people might not even have academic families, some haven't ever met their families, and raising didn't happen this year. So how are you going to how are you going to mend that bond between academic families? And in terms of raising, third years are expecting to get the future second years to kind of sponsor a raising for them, but they haven't even done a raising, so how are we going to deal with that kind of that missing reason, and how you're going to mend those gap between those academic families?
Right. I think this definitely plays into both sides of the role for me as far as where my policies sit. So the first thing that I would say about that is the fact that those Freshers Week resources that we talked about, they're also there for the phrase that I use, I think, is the preservation of events and opportunities that weren't able to happen this past year. So when I was making it, I had things in mind like, Glitter Ball or Race 2, things like that. But then that also includes May Dip, raisin. So people might already be aware of those things because we make pretty good national news with that stuff. At the same time, I want them to be able to understand what kind of social culture there is here. So they're not just going to be hard, concrete resources like this is third floor of Union, this is your bookable space, this is Beacon Bar. It's going to be also, this is what an academic family is. This is what Raisin looks like, you know? I think the Sabs could put together very interesting video content. We could do our own little like small film fight to show what that looks like. You know, just something entertaining but also informative. So that's going to perpetuate those traditions so that people have it in their head of what that looks like. Also, because it makes national news, we probably have very good video coverage of those traditions that we can use. As far as continuing those relationships, I think that we can do a better job of providing event opportunities that are specific for those things. So mixers for potential parents and potential kids, those types of things, providing opportunities for that. And then maybe as we get later down the line, continuing those mixers for people who still haven't found a family, but then we could do something like, you know, a pub quiz where you bring your potential academic family and that's your team. So it's like providing opportunities for that, because you have to understand that students are going to take their own lead on their social experience as well. But I do think that it's our job, regardless, to foster those things for them as a backup, just in case, or if they want to, because some people do rely on those services to make those connections.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to that. And now the final question I have in this section. So obviously one of your rival candidates is Tom Groves, who has done this position before. And so I guess my big question to you is, what can you bring that kind of rivals his experience and makes you better for the position?
Yeah, so the main phrase that I would use is fatigue. I think that he's been put through a lot of challenges this year, challenges that he couldn't expect, challenges that he didn't anticipate. And I feel like that can kind of create tunnel vision. So I think that, you know, not as many things got done this year that could have been done, unfortunately. I think that while he has done a good job on certain things, I think that there's time for a rotation. From what I understand, you know, there are very different needs that the students have than what are being served, and I don't see that changing in terms of manifestos. So, in my own personal opinion, I feel that I bring new experience. I feel like I bring freshness. I know that I bring dedication and interest and compassion. I want to hear what the students have to say, not that he doesn't, but I do have very concrete ideas already about new things that, if anything, I want to try. If they don't work, they don't work, but I have ideas on what I think will make this better. And I think that they're ideas that honestly might not be that crazy. So there becomes a question of why weren't these things tested out before? You know, like a union events committee. I think it's a great idea. It would take a lot of pressure off the role of the DOAs to where the DOAs could do even more. So, you know, there's certain things that can be done to increase efficiency, to make more things happen on the manifestos of like the DOAs and DOADs and all the sabbatical candidates as they come in. And I think that there's definitely a new need that needs to be served, that even though this past year was a difficult year and it was a transition year, it wasn't accommodated throughout that process. And I think that that's something that's really key for a transition year like that. So that's my opinion on that.
No, that's a good answer. It's a good answer. And you can be relieved. We've done the serious section. Now.
Ended on a heavy one.
Yeah, I ended on a heavy one. I'm sorry. So now we are going to do some quick fire fun questions.
Okay.
Just answer the first thing that comes into your mind. You'll get 2 minutes and you can see how many questions you can answer. Avery did this and he got to 10. Maybe you can get further, or maybe you won't. Maybe you'll give us more detailed answers.
Avery's pretty prepared all the time, so we'll see about that.
These are not hard questions, I promise. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes, there's one.
Okay. William, wait, hang on a second. Hang on. Pardon me, this will be edited out. I hope so. Right. 3, 2, 1. William or Mary?
Mary.
Oh, okay. What have you ever had a nickname?
Katie. Or Katybug, or Sea Monster, or Caterade. So yes, these are all family nicknames.
Oh, do you have siblings?
Yes, a sister.
Which one is? Oh,
She's old.
did you have an invisible friend?
No.
Oh, okay. Were the hot ones really that hot?
No. I was really I mean, they were as hot as I was showing in the video, but they weren't as hot as I expected, which makes me think I'm a superhuman.
Oh, wow. What's something new that you can bring to this role? Well, we kind of touched on that, but give me one thing.
Fresh perspective.
Okay. What's the worst event you've been to?
Oh. Oh, what is the worst event that I've been to? Probably the Western night. I mean,
Oh,
it was
okay.
still a good one, but like, it was the worst one.
Best advice for a fresher.
Go to everything you can.
Worst advice for a fresher.
Go to everything you can. That's an interpretive one. It's go to where you can to where you feel comfortable, and then don't burn yourself out. So that's what I mean by that.
Tell me a joke.
How many tickles does it take to make an octopus laugh?
How many?
Tentacles.
Oh.
That's my favorite joke.
Oh my god. If you could book any act for Freshers Week, who would it be?
Dua Lipa.
Oh. Do you believe in astrology?
Somewhat.
Okay. Favorite conspiracy theory?
That the queen is a lizard.
And on that note, that ends our interview. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us for a bit. You were an absolute pleasure, and I wish you the best of luck for the elections.
Thank you so much. Hope everybody comes out to the debate tonight, please.
Yes, do go along to that. Yes, but this is the end. And thank you, Caitlin, once again. And this is St.Ation signing off. Bye.
Bye.